All right, welcome back. We are MDEV1004, that's Mobile APIs and Frameworks, in the summer 2023 semester at Georgian, and it's week 9, part 1 of our broadcast and reporting. And today there's going to be a bit of crossover with some stuff you've done before, hopefully. Let me take that back. There may not be any crossover because you may have not done this before, because you never know. I'm not sure exactly what you were taught in the other courses you've done. So it says really our plan was to connect to social APIs, Facebook and Instagram. I'm going to move this out a little bit, and I'm going to continue with JWT from last week because we didn't quite hit that. What we ended up doing was making our API a little bit more robust in terms of error validation and checking and all that stuff, right? So I did that, and it's a bit of a middle step between here and there. And I'm doing that because I want to make sure that things are good with your API that you kind of put together, or we put together. And so that's what we did last week. We're going to do JWT, but we never really got around to doing all that. So we need to do a little bit of work there today. So I'm just going to kind of cross that out. We didn't kind of do that. What we ended up doing last week, we talked about OAuth strategy, so discussed. This is what we did. And we discussed JWT, right? But we didn't really do it, right? That was not something that we actually, kind of implemented last week, which is, again, not terrible. At least we can do it this week. That's kind of the plan. And what we also did was we did some, kind of error checking and data validation on the back end. Okay, so that's what we did. We didn't do anything on the front end. The front end would have been a front end framework or user interface that we would do. You would do the checking with, but we didn't do that last week. So this week we're going to hit JWT. That's for sure. We're actually going to do it. And I also want to create a simple UI for our API. Because the simple UI for our API is due with your assignment 3. That's what the assignment 3 is all about. With your movie list that you've put together, your favorite movies or whatever. Or your favorite things that you're putting together. What I wanted to do is talk about this, and I want to put a simple UI together for our API with some kind of fetching, code to fetch information from your API and implement it in iOS. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing today. And so again, what we need to do is we need to talk about how to fetch API data for iOS and Android, all right? Because your in-class exercise for this week is going to be doing that. Like, I want you guys to do that kind of stuff, so that way you can actually fetch your data and test it out, because this is one of the things you're going to have to do for your assignment 3. Okay, so that way, again, every lesson we do together, my mind is, let's prep you for the next thing. Let's prep you for the next thing. Let's get you, so they all should be relevant. It's not going to be something that's useless. So hopefully, I don't know, Robert, did you have a chance to, have you done fetching API data from?
We've done it in a few different ways, but we'll see how you apply it.
Cool. Yeah. All right, excellent. I love it. We're going to use the completion closure. So that's what we're going to do. And a completion closure, again, this should be review for you, because this is kind of the de facto way of doing it in iOS. Sometimes also called a completion handler or simply a callback. It's really, a closure is an anonymous function, which is what that is, that, basically you pass that as a parameter to a function. So a function passed to a parameter as a parameter to another function is really what this callback thing is, right? So that's what a completion closure is. And the reason why we want to use that is because it asynchronously notifies the caller when a task or operation completes. And that means that, remember that the asynchronous nature of JavaScript and your backend API, right, it doesn't, quite work, right, without you having to go in and change stuff. So, and so what we want to do is, there's two things that it comes back with. There's a results return, and there's also an errors return. Those two things, results and errors, is where the results of your fetch is basically going to be stored, and any errors are stored in the errors object. Okay, that's what happens. So what it allows us is this idea of non-blocking execution, which is in line with what we've been doing with Node.js this semester, because again, Node.js has non-blocking code, right? So that's the idea behind it. So I'm giving you kind of a bit of a template for how this would work. So this is what we would make a function. And again, this is kind of like I said to you before. Hey, Karan, how you doing? This is kind of a little bit of a crossover with what you may have done before in other courses. I'm not sure if you did something like this, Robert, but yes?
Yeah.
Exactly the same? A completion closure?
Slightly different.
All right, so again, what it would be is like you do a guard let, and then the completion closure, basically what it would do is take two things, your movie data, which is your results, and then your error object. And this is where you're going to be storing that stuff. And then you're going to use URL session. Now, there's other ways to do this too. Okay, you don't have to use URL session, but if you use URL session, and what that does is it basically takes that URL. So the URL, the guard let, basically checks to see if the URL is valid, right? And then what ends up happening is we reach out to the URL and we get data back. Either we get data or error, as an example. If none of these, if there's an error, then we return back the error. So if there's some kind of network error, if some kind of an empty response, so let's say we get no data back, we have an error completion there. And then at the same time, we do a do catch when there is data. So then if we get to this part, like, because each of these if statements or guard lets returns out of the function, so it won't allow you to get to this part if there's an error or some kind of empty data. Then when we get to here, what it does is the completion actually completes the, kind of handles the success and so on. So that's really what the completion closure is going to look like, the function fetch movies. This will be the heart of what we're going to be doing in iOS. Okay. The other thing I've done here is I've just put in some information about what these things do. But again, this is review for you, so I'm not going to kind of go through it. But more or less, it explains why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. The next part is, when you want to call the fetch movies function, this is also interesting syntax because you may have not seen this syntax either, where you don't have to use parentheses to call the function. Instead, you can use curly braces, right? So I don't know if you've seen that syntax at all. Okay, so what this does is basically what you do is in the curly braces, when you do the function call, you get it's almost like I'm doing a promise in like we talked about on the JavaScript side, right? It's kind of the same thing. So you pass in your movies. This is kind of like passing movies into the function, right? Movies would be the array of movies. Then you get your error, right? You kind of set up the error object, and then you set up something called a dispatch queue. And what this does, the dispatch queue allows you to fetch movies on the main thread. So because your devices are actually multi-threaded applications. That's what they run, right? We want this thing to run on the main thread. And what this allows us to do then, after we get that, is kind of check to see if movies has any kind of data. Like, does movies have any data, right? If movies does have any data, or if movies exists, then check to see if you got anything. Did you get anything, or is it empty? If you didn't get anything, like let's say, for example, you're accessing your API somehow and there's no movies in the database, which is possible, then we want to display an error message. And display an error message is going to be our custom function we're going to write today, right? I'll show you what I'm going to do. But it's going to be something like that, right? And we're going to basically say that when we get to this point, if movies are not empty, then what we want to do is we want to store the data that we fetch from the API inside of our movies array. That's what we're going to do. And then we're going to set up a table view, right, as a user interface, and we're going to reload that data. So as soon as we get that, we fetch the movies, we're going to reload the data. It's going to update the table, and it's going to show the movie data, which is pretty cool. Okay, so that's if movies exist. If doesn't somehow, and the URL is a problem, let's say, for example, it's timed out, that's also a possibility because when we're using render sleeps. And if you try and get data from render, and it might take long enough where you might get a timeout. That can happen. So we have to test for that. And so what this is going to do that for us too with this display error message, right? And then the other option might be some other kind of error. like some kind of back-end error where, let's suppose we've killed render somehow, right? And render's not working, it's giving us a 500 error or something crazy like that, right? So anything like that we want to capture. And that's what basically what this fetch movies call. This is actually the call we're going to put inside of the view-did-load function in iOS. That's how it would work. So it's, again, a bit of a different way of doing things. And if you've never seen it, it's kind of like more of an advanced call. But you need to do it this way, in my opinion, in order for you to have a good kind of interaction with your API. And once we have this, if we can get data back like this, from our movie database, right, as an example, then it's the next step is really just doing things like full CRUD with our movie database, which is what we're going to do. Okay. All right. So that is, and this kind of talks about how to correctly call the fetch movies function, and I talk about what the curly braces do here and all the things I just talked about here, and I go through the details of how this all works. I put this in place just in case anybody who's watching this video or who's here in class, they're not clear about it later on when they look through it again. They're like, so what does he mean by that? Well, here I've written it down for you, just so that you can do it. Finally, we want to talk about the display error message function, which is just a little call, because I talked about using a display message function. I just put it in here just so you know what it's going to be, which really what it does is it presents the alert controller, which pops up a little message that basically says, there's an error or whatever. It's a little similar to a toast or whatever on Android. Okay, so that is what we want to do today. That is the way we're going to do our fetching data. And what I want to do now is start building something with our on the iOS side. So here, kind of over the weekend, I put together. I bought myself a little Mac Studio, finally, right?
Wow.
Yeah. I know. I feel really happy about it. Well, only because, damn it, it's like about time, and my other Mac was coughing up all the time, and it couldn't do anything. So here, I think I've got it set up, and I kind of put this together in a short order. So I might be missing something. So for those people who are watching, or my friend, Robert, who's here, if I'm a little bit slow or something goes wrong, it's because basically it's a brand new machine. All right, so that's what I've done. I've put together, right? So here we are. I want to try and start with Xcode, and I can't tell you how this feels like the Mac is actually physically in front of me, right? Compared to what I've done before in the past, right? So, which is pretty cool. Like way faster. So I want to create a new Xcode project. That's what I want to do. And so think about this. I'm remoting in, and this is the speed that I'm getting. So I can only imagine what it's like when we're not. So here it is. I'm going to make a product, and it's going to be MDEV. Let me just go back one step. Make sure that it's, previous. I want to make sure it's not multi-platform, that it's iOS. Sorry. I knew that was wrong right away when I started doing it. Next, let's try this again. So I'm doing a product. I'm going to go MDEV1004 and the summer 2023 semester, and it is in-class exercise 7 today. And I'm going to add the account later. The organizational identifier, of course, is ca.Georgian College. And we're not going to use Swift UI. We're going to use Storyboard for this one to make it a little easier in some ways. I'm not going to include tests or core data. We're not doing that. And I'm going to click Next. It's going to ask me where I want to put this thing. And so far, we've been putting everything inside of your ICES folder, and this is exactly where I'm going to put it. Right? So this is where I'm going to put ICE 7. Okay? And actually, it's up. Like, that's blazing compared to what I was doing before. Okay? Like, I don't know if yours is as fast as mine, probably, but I'm, like, impressed. Right? Because when I looked at it, I was like, something's wrong. Wait a minute, it's up already. How did that work? Maybe I loaded the wrong thing. No, it's the actual thing, right? So, wow. I want to switch this to an iPhone 14 Pro Max because that's where I want to go. And then in the main storyboard, we have some work to do here. I'm going to definitely switch this to an iPhone 14 Pro Max as well. So this is the size class. is what this is. I'm just going to maximize our view of Xcode because I think we need to do that, right? So we can see it a little better. And what we want to do is a couple things. First of all, before we do anything else with our main view controller here, I want to set up an interface, beginning interface. So what I really want here is just a table view. And the table view is going to be pretty straightforward. So let's go up here to the right, and I'm just going to grab a table. Here it is. And I could have done this differently. I could have just downloaded or kind of put together a table view controller. What I want to do is I want to just grab these control handles and, you know, kind of expand this thing. There's other ways of doing this as well, by the way. You know, for those of you who remember, there are ways of doing this numerically instead of how I'm doing it with dragging and dropping, right? So just set up the table view control. I'm just going to zoom in here to make my job a little bit easier. I just want to set up the table view itself so that it is taking up most of the space. I want to give a little bit of space at the top, because what I want to do at the top is I want to put in a little bit of a label. But before we do that, I want to get a table view cell. So the table view cell is our prototype cell that we're going to use, and I'm going to drag and drop that table view cell into the table. There it is. There's our prototype cell. Okay, and we're going to monkey with that table view cell. We're going to make a custom table view cell for ourselves in a bit. At the top, I also want to add in a label. So pretty straightforward again. So let's type in label. And that label is going to be kind of in the middle. I want to stretch it so that it fills, you know, kind of the space again. So I'm just going to move that so it goes all the way from one side to the other side. I always find this is kind of like a bit of a hack to use with labels to take up the entire space. And the reason for this is because then you need less, you know, kind of layout information, because it already does it for you, right? So constraints wise, it doesn't have to be too complicated for us. So I'm going to make this 30 points is what I'm going to do. I'm also going to make it bold. So let's make it bold. And we're going to also center the whole thing so that it's kind of in the middle. And we're going to say our movie, favorite movie list is what I'm going to call this thing. I'm going to put the details right in here. So this is, you know, favorite movies. We'll call that, okay? And so our favorite movies will be listed here. So that's kind of our beginning interface, okay, that we're starting off with. What I want to do with the prototype cell is itself. So I want to kind of go and click on the table view cell itself, this one, right? So there's the table view on the left in the outliner, and there's the table view cell that's on the left. And the table view cell is something that we want to zoom into. So I'm just going to zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. And what I want to do with this is, I'm going to pull this thing, my little mini map here on the side, just to make it a little bit centered. There we go. What I want to do with the table view cell is notice on the right in the inspector here, it's just custom. That's a custom style. There's also basic that you can choose. So you can choose with a title that comes with that right away. And there's also right detail. You can choose those kind of things, as well as left detail, something like that, title and detail, as well as subtitle. So you can do one of these. For now, what I want to do is I just want to use title and subtitle as something that I want to do. Later on, we're going to come back here and change this to a custom view cell. And the reuse identifier is movie cell. Let's put that in there, because we need to identify what our cell is called, okay? When we make a custom cell, right, later on, then we're going to put in our own labels and everything else in here. And you know, we're going to drag and drop some stuff into the content view for the movie cell. So notice right now we have a title, and we have detail, and those kind of title and detail are actual labels that are in there. Okay, that's like, I can't really access them because this is part of the, because even in the content view that you're seeing here, and if I click on the title, this part, you can see that in terms of manipulation, even though I see control handles in here, I can't do anything because it's part of the default movie cell that we've set up. Okay, that's what it is. So if I was going to set up a custom, a custom prototype cell, what would I do? Of course, I've got to go here and type in custom. So that's the one I would do. And then inside of the content view now, I have complete control over what I want to put in there. So here's what I want to put in. I need 3 things. I want the rating, I want the title, and I want the subtitle. And they're all going to be, it's going to give us the ability for us to put stuff in. Now there's a couple things a couple ways to do this. We could use labels. The problem with labels is we don't have complete control of all of the control handles with labels, right? But if I use a text view instead, so let's say if I did something like a text view, right? Or a text field is what I'm talking about. If I go with a text field instead, and if I drag and drop a text field in here, right, just put it in here, you can see that the text field, what it does is it gives me control handles on the right and left. And it really doesn't give me control handles anywhere else. I'm just showing you this so you can see the difference, right? But if I go with the label, here's the label. What does a label give me if I drag and drop that? So if I drag and drop a label in here, here's a label. Then a label gives me complete control of the entire thing in terms of how big it is and all that kind of stuff, right? So I can kind of use the control handles to change the exact size of the label, okay? So that's what it does here. So again, I'm just talking about this because this is what I want to kind of do. And I'm just going to delete those little things in the outliner here on the left-hand side. Because before we do our prototype cell, what I want to talk about is a movie cell class that I want to set up here on the side. So let's make a brand new file. So a new file, we're going to call this moviecell.swift. Or did I call it movie cell? Hold on a second. If I go GitHub, just 1 second. Of course, am I not signed in? See what happens? Yep. Yep. This is what I was telling you about. Like, this is like the new stuff that happens when you have a new machine, right? But again, I'll have to say that I'm super happy with the performance so far. Did I type in the wrong thing? I did. I'm super happy with the performance of this thing so far, and it's exactly what I was talking about with some students before, where some of them were asking me, "Hey, professor, I want to get a laptop for first year." And they're like, "What do I do?" And I always say to people, you don't need to have a laptop. You don't really need to do that. Instead, what you can do is you can use some kind of a Mac Studio, which is an option. It's called Movie Table View Cell. That's what it's called. Movie Table View Cell. You can get a Mac Studio or you can get a Mac Mini, and a Mac Mini or a Mac Studio is just fine. Okay, so let's go back there. So again, I want to add a new file. So a new file is what I was going to do. I want to add a Swift file. I want to click Next. And I want to call this Swift file Movie Table View Cell. Movie Table View Cell. .swift. And what this is going to do is provide us with a spot. Yeah, see, this is also too small. Bear with me while I change my Xcode settings. See what happens? I told you, things are going to change. Behaviors, text editing, line numbers. I want those, coding ribbon, key bindings. Arg. I need to make this a little bigger for you guys, otherwise you're going to be like me, breaking your eyes. I think it's in text editing. It's got to be in text editing. Oh, here it is, editing. Okay, Unicode, indentation, key binding, source control. Do you know where it is, Robert? I want to make it larger. Come on. I thought you were an expert by now. It's right here. Themes. So it says plain text 12. We're going to make this so that it is not 12. It's going to be a much bigger, 14. Okay, even bigger. Let's make it 16. It's just this way you guys can see what I'm typing, and I can see what I'm typing. We're not at 146, 16. You know, I think that makes it a little better. Plain text. And everything else is smaller again? Come on. I have to type everything? Wow. I'm just going to make this all the same. We're going to say that the size for everything is 16. There we go. All right. I know I had done this before sometime, but I had forgotten. All right, so we don't need any of this stuff because what I've done is, because I've given you the gist, and I put this up on Blackboard if you want to see where that is, right? So if you look on Blackboard, there's a link to this thing. You can literally copy what I've got in here just to save us some time, and we can just simply paste everything in here. Okay, so what it does is it gives us 3 text fields, right? And a movie table view cell is going to give us a text field for title label, our studio label, and our rating label. Those are the 3 things it's going to give us. We need to connect these to actual things, like user interface items, inside of our main storyboard, right? So what we're going to do now is going to go back to the main storyboard, and knowing that we have 3 labels here, we're going to try and create them so we can connect them here. Okay, so going back to main storyboard, and I need 3 labels. So this is our first one. The first one is going to be our rating label. So I'm going to just drag it in here where I think it should be, somewhere just in this part right here. And I'm going to actually call it rating label inside the outliner. So here in the outliner, I'm just going to double click, or click and then click again maybe. And I want to call this the rating label, just so that we know what it is, right? And here it is. Just going to zoom in there. So you can see that I'm really going to zoom into this part so you can see it nice and clearly. So what I want to do is, this rating label is going to be a number. And usually what I do is, whenever I make a label, I want to make it appear the way it's supposed to be. So I'm going to kind of say something like 9.9, right? Or, sorry, I would make it something like 99.9. Okay, so the reason why I put 99.9 is because it gives us the spacing that we want for our label. So this is what the spacing for the label is going to look like. I put 99.9 because this way I know that that is going to work for me. Okay, 99.9. It's also going to be, I'm going to create it with a few other things too. And by default, what I want to give it is a color value at the back end. So the tint for the background, we can give it a kind of a built-in color. I'm thinking by default it should be something like a green color. So I'm going to use system green, right? Is what I want as the background color. Let's try that again. So let's go back to default. I meant the background color. I'll be okay. Today's one of those days. Is system green. So I'm going to make it like this. Okay. Now you can clearly see that this is going to be too small for the size of my numbers, and I've done this so that way we can easily see what this looks like. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger and a little bit taller. Just in here like this. And I'm also going to make it so that it's centered. So the text is centered inside here. So this is kind of where our rating is going to be, right? So that's the first thing that's going to be in our thing. So the rating label, okay? When you have a green color, black is not great for contrast, right? So typically what I like to do is instead of it, being, black, sometimes what I do is I might make it white, right? So just to check it out, see what that looks like. Let's try that again, undo. So again, what I want to do is I want to change the text highlight. So where is that again? I love when a plan just, comes together in my head, but actually, here it is. Doesn't really come together. Label color is where it is right here, white color. And there it is. So that's kind of what I might want if I was going to use a green with a black, or especially something like a red or something else like that. What I want to do is when the rating is when the rating is below 5 or below, it's going to be red. When the rating is between 5 and 7, it'll be yellow, and when it's greater than 7, it'll be green. Okay, that's kind of something like that where I'm thinking about for the rating. So that's the first thing in our prototype cell. The prototype cell is going to have a label that's called rating label. Let's also add in here another label, 2 more labels, one for our title and the other one for the studio. Let's add them in. So adding in another label, and we'll say that this is the title for the movie, right? So this is the movie title. We'll call this title. Maybe we'll call it title label. How about that? Title label. Again, I'm just changing the name of this in the outliner so I can go back and identify what these things are later, right? And the title label is going to be different than the other one. I'm just going to zoom out here a little bit, because what we want to do with the title label is make sure that it kind of spans, kind of the full width of the cell. All right, so kind of right to the edge of the cell is where I'm going. Okay, and so why? Because movie titles can be longer, like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. It's a pretty long, title, and so we want most of it to be shown here. We want to make the title bold because that's the title of the movie, so I'll make it bold so we can style that right a little bit. And then I also want a subtitle to go below it. So let's do that. And I'll get another label, and I'll drag it underneath this one. This where that label goes. There we go. And then this one will be where the subtitle is going to go. Again, I'm going to make the subtitle the studio. And this will be the studio label. So, example would be like Paramount or whatever it's going to be. So this is studio label. There we go. And what I also want to do with these labels is kind of just type in what they are. So this is studio, and this is the title. Now, the studio should be probably a little bit smaller than the title, right? So title and studio. And my thoughts are that we can probably make the title, instead of 17, we can go to something like 18 points. And for the title, or for the studio, we can shift down to something like 14 points. So a bit of it should be a marked difference, right? Something like that. Okay, and that so far is what I have. How about you, Robert? How are you doing? Yeah. Okay. So again, we this is our prototype cell, and now there's many ways to do this. You can do a prototype cell, a custom view prototype cell as programmatic, so you can make it so it appears programmatically. You can create the prototype cell. I'm going to make it so that it's kind of like a user interface item that we created together. Now, what we want to do is we want to connect these to the movie table view cell class. right? So the way to do that is I'm just going to, kind of close this off to give us a little bit more screen real estate here. And I want to pull up a second, I want to pull up a second view. So I'm going to kind of click this item right here, which is going to give me split screen. So that item over there does that, right? And what I want to do for the right-hand side is I want to kind of click on, this is where I'm going to just scrunch my screens up a little bit. The right-hand side is going to be my movie table view cell, this part. And the left-hand side is going to be my storyboard. And then I'm going to just expand these things so that you can see them both. Oops. There we go. Yeah, so you see something like this. I can't use the assistant inspector because the assistant inspector only works for the view controller that it's connected to. And in this case, the view controller is connected to a file called view controller. That's what the storyboard's connected to. We can't use it like that. But here what we can do is we can just drag and drop from these cells here directly into these cells over here to create a connection. So for example, the title label, I can just grab this little point here and just drag and drop it so that it kind of goes on the title. And if it doesn't seem to work, because let's say for example, you're just not seeing that connection, so it doesn't do that, you can always do it the other way around. So you can always grab the title, or you can also drag it into the outliner. So if you're ever in doubt, you can always try and do one of these, right, where it kind of connects to this side, right? Again, if it doesn't work, you can highlight the title, and then you can control drag from the title out to the outlet that you want to connect to. So here's something. So why wouldn't we be able to do this thing? So here's our UI table view cell, but it's not connecting. It's not doing this kind of thing. Why wouldn't it be? Why can't we do that? I want to make a connection, right? So I want to connect these IB outlets to this thing here. So why can't we? So if I control drag from here, and let's say I want to control drag into my movie class, it just doesn't seem to want to do anything. How come? Do we know why? Let's do some more prep is the answer. Okay, so this is what I want to do. I want to be able to connect these things to the custom table view cell, but there's issues, and we'll talk about this in a second. One is the movie table view cell itself, right, is what I'm trying to put together. And if we open up, let me just close this down for a second. And if we open up the the selection on the right, then there's one more thing we have to do. On the left-hand side here, there is the identity inspector, and we need to identify its class. Otherwise, it won't allow you to do that. So that's what I forgot to do. We're just going to click on movie table view cell here. You should be able to do that now, right? Can you? I'm waiting for you. And when we do this, when we put in movie table view cell here in its class, because I forgot to do that, then on the right-hand side now, right, what we want to do is the exact same thing we did before, which is let's pull up that split screen again, right? So if I go to the split screen, and then I kind of select the movie table view cell, there we go, I'll be okay. And then we can get rid of the split screen and go back to here. Now we should be able to affect that drag and drop, right? Because the reason why we couldn't do it before was because we didn't have this associated, the movie table view cell, with a class, a custom class. Now we have, and now there's a connection between the two, even though we have none. So let's try it again. So let's say I'm going to take this table, the title label, and now just drag and drop it to here, and then should it work? The answer is it should at this point. If it doesn't, we can always try doing it the other way. So now you can see that there's a connection, right, where you can try and do this thing. Now, one thing it says is our title labels are text fields. That's another problem, right? I've made, in this scenario, our title labels, our movie table view cell, I've made them as UI text fields, but they're actually UI labels. Let's change these. So UI label, that's another problem I kind of put together. My previous design had UI text fields, and this time I'm doing it differently. So UI label, here we go. Now let's try it one more time, okay? So again, this is all review. So if I kind of drag and drop now, we should be able to connect. Take a look. So I've done that. There's my connection for that one. And now if I go to my studio label, we should be able to connect to that one. And if I go to my rating label, we should be able to connect to that one. And now you can see that those are all connected. And I have to do this first before I actually do any programming, because I got to do all the user interface stuff way at the beginning. Okay? Did you get all that work?
Yep.
Okay. I can. You want me to back up? What do you want me to do?
No, continue.
I don't mind. I can. It's only you. I'm teaching for you today, right? For the rest of the class. And, did you get it done?
No, I have a problem where I'm on my view,
Uh-huh.
on my screen view, on my storyboard view.
Yeah.
I cannot do the drag and drop, so I'm still at the point where I just changed the UI label on the text, so mine looks like that. It comes up with an error on the right hand side with the dot errors, so I don't think I associated the cells properly.
Okay. So the way I did it was, like I said, let me just bring up my this right side over here. So, oops, that's the wrong one. Didn't mean to do that. I meant to do. Sorry. When you're remoting, you have to kind of put this in an innocuous space. Someplace it's not going to do it. So if I click on the left hand side, this is the outliner. If I click on the content view, right, of my movie cell. So here's my movie cell. So there's a bunch of stuff up here. The first thing you should do is go to this part right here, this tab, which is the identity inspector. In the identity inspector, you did this movie table view cell. You need to do that because if you don't do this, then there's no association with the class and the custom table view cell we're creating. So did you do that first?
No.
Okay, get that done first. And then once we've got this, once we've got the class associated, let me know when you're ready to go to the next step.
So you associate the movie cell?
Yeah, so if you click on the left where it says movie cell,
Yeah.
if you take that movie cell and associate it, when you click, you have to click on the outliner to somehow get to this. And on the right hand side, you're going to go to the identity inspector,
Yeah.
right? And then you're going to pull down the class. There's just show me only one class because we added it in, right? Only one class should be available that's compatible with a movie cell. You see that? So again, if I was to go here on the right hand side, right, then I could pull down the movie cell. You see that as an option?
The identity and type, I got the type, it has the type, and then it has the location and some other stuff.
Are you here or are you here? Where are you?
I was in the first one.
This one. This is where you were. This is right here.
That's
No,
right.
you don't want to go here. You want to go here to this one. Okay?
Okay, the class, right.
Yeah. And then that's what you're doing. You have to do a custom
And I
class.
just select the movie cell. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So now when you've done that, then if you you kind of pull up the other side. Let's go back. And when you actually add in a split screen, the split screen here. So I've kind of clicked this button for the split screen. I'm going to select the movie table view cell here on the right hand side, and then when we go back to this side, this is the main storyboard. There it is. And what you want to do with main storyboard is bring it into focus like this, and then you don't have to drag and drop from your main storyboard. You can actually drag and drop from these little buttons here, from here down to there. Right, try that. And that should allow you to drag from those to there. Now they have to be UI labels, not UI text views. If they're UI text views, you need to change that.
Yeah, I've already changed that.
Okay, good. Does it work? Good. After we associate those labels with the custom table view cell, right? Beautiful. Once we associate the labels with a custom table view cell, now Swift is going to understand how to lay those things out. And you can do this for any other type of cell that you want to put together. So if you want to add buttons or gestures or whatever you're going to do, you can actually it's a whole other class that you can make use of. It's almost like a sub view is what we're creating here with this thing.
Yeah, and the only thing that came up the X where you have to add the UI kit and it does it automatically.
Yeah. All right. So now that we've got our table view set up properly and so on, the next step is I want to rename our view controller. So view controller right now is called view controller. Let's rename the file to movie view controller. We have to do some other things here. Movie view controller. And once we rename the file, we also want this thing to be the movie view controller here. So this is movie view controller, movie view controller. And the movie view controller itself, right, it needs to be associated with the storyboard, right? So once I change the name of the file, then the storyboard has no connection with anything, right? So if I go back to the main storyboard, you can see that what I need to do is on the, again, I'm going to bring up this, this view right here, and I'm going to click on where it says at the top, where it says view controller itself, this part, okay? And on the right, you can see, again, I'm going to my inspector, and I'm going to pull down, instead of view controller, I'm going to pull down movie view controller, which is what I want to find. Now, if you can't find it here, the movie view controller, you should. Here it is right here. There's movie view controller. Why? Because we renamed the class. We renamed the class movie view controller and the file movie view controller. That means you must associate the movie view controller with the storyboard, because remember, the movie view controller is the code behind file for the view. That's what it is, right? Okay, good. Now if you've done that, we have our new association. The next part is we need to set up our table delegates and data sources, right? Because the table itself needs a delegate and a data source. So I'm going to go into the table view here in the outliner. This is the easiest way to do it that I found, right? And I want you to control drag from the table view to the movie view controller like this. Watch, from here to here, okay? And then you can see that I can select data source, right? And I can do the same thing from the table view to the movie view controller, and I can select delegate. So I can select both data source and delegate. If I do it one more time, you can see that it actually has both of them selected. I'm not going to do it this time, but I'm showing you that you can show that you should see at the end both of them are selected like this. Okay. What this does is it associates the table view itself with the view controller, which we named movie view controller, as a table data source and delegate. Instead of me typing out everything, what I've done for you is I've supplied you with a couple of more files. Let's go back to our gists here that I gave you. And one thing I gave you today, right, was a movie.swift file. Here it is, look. Here's the movie.swift file, right? And what I want to do is I want to grab this movie.swift file, and I want to create a movie.swift file in our structure, our iOS application here. So I'm going to right click, and I want to add in a new file. I'm going to call it movie.swift. So here's a Swift file, movie.swift. And movie.swift is literally going to be a struct that looks like this. So here's our struct. So I gave you that. That's the gist. You should see the gist. So you don't have to work hard there. And this is exactly the table structure that we've had before in the past with the stuff that we did with your API, right? So that's something that we've got there. Okay. Now, a couple things, and this is something different for you guys than compared to the other classes. Really, what do we have here? We have a model. This is our model. This is, you can always also think about this as our schema for our database, if you will, right? So what I want to do here is I want to right click, and I want to make a new group, okay? And my new group that I want to make a new group called models, right? And I'm going to grab this movie.swift and put it inside of the models folder. So we can see that the movie is a movie model. All right, that's what this is. That's what this thing is. Okay, does that make sense? Now that we have a movie model, right, then when we copy paste our stuff from the movie view controller.swift that I gave you, instead of me typing all that out with you, which is a bit of a slog, right? I've given you the gist for this. So let's go back to the movie view controller gist that I gave you again here. So if I go back to, if you go to Blackboard, it's also listed there. And here's my movie view controller. One thing I didn't do, and I should probably change this. Just one sec, I will edit it. This should say movie view controller. I'm not sure why I made a view controller, but it should be movie view controller. There we go. So here what I want to do is I want to just select all, right? and I want to copy it and bring it into here, right? And now you have the code that I was talking about earlier, and I want to go through it with you so you understand all the stuff that I've got going on, okay? First of all, let's take a look at our fetch movies. Did you do it, by the way? Did you copy paste? Let's go to that fetch movies function inside the class, inside the movie view controller class. The fetch movies function, we need a proper thing. This is for the other class that I put together. This is why it's a review. And it should be, for you, it's MDEV1004 M2023 live site is what it's called. Live site. That's what we called it for you on render. Remember? Let's change that URL so it's the right URL. And then let's save. All right, and I want to go through the thing because for the most part we're code complete. Let's talk about this. So first, we need to make a connection with our IB outlet with the UI, the UI table view, right? And in order for us to do that, we had to do this. At the top here, we had to implement our UI table view delegate and UI table view data source. We had to do that as protocols that we implemented here, okay? What I'm going to do now is I want to be able to see this and drag and drop it together on the storyboard. So I'm going back to the storyboard, and now I'm going to go to the assistant editor here. If you click on the assistant, what it's going to do is going to show us this side-by-side view where we see the, we see the storyboard on the left and we see the assistant editor on the right. I want to this time grab the whole table view, or you can also do it this way. You can grab this little button here, the UI table view, and drag it to the table view itself. So just kind of drag this over here, okay, like so. And we need to make that association because otherwise iOS won't know what to do. So you have to make that association with the table view now. You can see that you can do that. You can hover over, okay? Once we've made that association, I can just then stop doing the assistant editor. I can just click on this little button and click on assistant, and the assistant editor will go away, okay? Back to this point now. Now back to the code. Movie table view controller. So now we have a connection. We see that there's that little button here for the outlet is filled in. That means we have a connection to that whole thing. So that's the first part. The next part is movies. Movies is an array of type movie. So we couldn't have done, on line 7 here, we couldn't have done this line until we had our movie model, which we've added in, which is a struct actually in iOS. And then we did our viewDidLoad. Our viewDidLoad does that exact fetch movies function, right, call that we talked about before. And then down below around line 40, you can see that there's the display error message function, which I added in, okay? Finally, there's the fetch movies function, which actually calls up the exact stuff that I showed you in the PowerPoint slide, which connects to your live site server on render. That's what it does, right? And that live site server on render creates this, this connection, okay? If that makes sense. At the bottom, we have two table view overloaded functions. These are overridden table view functions that are built in that we had to use. We had to implement these stubs, function stubs, because we're using the movie view controller as the data source and delegate of the table view, right? And so because we did that, you can see that we have the number of rows is the movies.count. So how many movies are inside the array, right? And then for this part, this kind of defines how we dequeue the reusable cell. We have to dequeue the reusable cell with identifier movie cell. We did that identifier when we set up the user interface, and we want to cast it as, on line 83, movie table view cell, which is what we kind of made. So we're saying, hey, I made this custom table view cell, and I want to dequeue it. This new cell I'm creating, because that's what we're saying here, let's create a new cell object, and let's cast it as a movie table view cell, our custom table view cell, the way we want to lay it out, all right? Then what we want to do is we say, okay, let's set up a movie, let's create a new movie, and what we want to say is we want to get the movie from the movies array at index path. Whatever the, as we loop through each of the movies in the array, we want to take that specific movie and assign it to this, to the movie object. And for that particular movie object, we want to assign the table label, the title label, the studio label, and the rating label that we get from the movie as the movie title, the movie studio, and the movie critics rating. Okay, that's where we're getting there. All right. Finally, at the bottom, this is what I talked about. Depending on our rating, we're going to change the UI color and for the background and the text color. All right. So we can change the text color and everything else as we read in the movies. That's what this thing does. Okay. One more thing to do. When we do our fetch, remember we're using this JSON decoder. That's on line 67. So JSON decoder, what it does is it says, okay, I want to decode the movie because we have serialized. We talk about serialized and deserialization. We've serialized our movie data into a format that is JSON-like, right? And we get to tell it that the movie data is going to come back into a structure that looks like the struct we defined inside of our models folder, this struct right here. So we're basically saying, hey, we're getting the data, it's JSON data, please align it to these properties, which is a beautiful thing. Okay, let's see if we can actually make this work now. So let's try pressing play. Now, here's something. Your lovely render.com API has been sleeping for the last week or so, right? Which means I fully expect for us to get a timeout in the first time we run this thing. May not. We'll see how it goes. Here's our little simulator as it's running. And I can't express to you, Robert, how relieved I am to use this Mac Studio compared to my old 2015 Mac Intel MacBook Pro. And look at this. I got favorite movies, but I'm not getting any data. Why? It's trying to fetch the data, huh? Timed out for you?
No.
But it's going to time out. It's going to time out. And why? Because it's basically whenever we use render, right? This is a great way to test, by the way, to test that the timeout function works. If we get an error, like this is what it's going to do for us. It's going to help us test that error out, or any other error, because we're actually trying to make it work. So we have to wait for a second. It's going to keep on trying to list that stuff, and let's see what happens. So give it a second. But it is keyed for error. So if there's a problem, it's going to say, meh, it's not going to work, kind of thing. There it is. Look at that. And they're all green, right? They're all green and they're black. Notice that I changed the background color to black to make sure that was good. They are all green and black because what we ended up doing was we used, they're all good movies that I like, kind of thing, right? So of course they're going to be in greater than 7, right? Except maybe for Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, which was rated 7.7, but I think that's underrated, in my opinion, if you're a Star Trek fan. So, did you get this?
No. I went to go log in at render and it says for some reason I'm attached to a wrong email address, so I'm trying to log in.
Okay. So while you're doing that, so your job, this is my job that I've done with you. Your job, which is your to-do for in-class exercise 7, is do the same thing with Android. So pull up and kind of put this up. Now, here's what you do with Android, and I'm telling you what to do for in-class exercise 7 for everybody here. For Android, and if you've never done Android, or if you're a part-time student and you're kind of taking each course separately, and maybe you didn't take the Android Advanced yet, or whatever, remember, here's what I'm going to allow. ChatGPT is okay, right? The beautiful thing about this is if I take the data that I've given you and put it inside of ChatGPT, it'll literally give you out the Kotlin that you need, or Java, whatever you prefer, right? So here's what you need to do with Android. You need to use a recycler view that instead of a table view, right? Because that's the way you do it. And you need to use something called retrofit, and you need to use something called Moshi for the JSON data, okay? So I want to use retrofit and Moshi. Let's try this out. So if I go back and talk about this for a second with our friend at ChatGPT, let's do this. So if I say chat.openai, hopefully it'll remember who I am, or maybe I have to log in, you never know. Okay, that was a little bit delayed. And what I want to do with our ChatGPT is something like, okay, the following is iOS, kind of an iOS model, custom table view cell, and view controller. Right, so you kind of type those in. So what you do is you literally go to your stuff. So here is the model. So you're going to copy, and you put that in, and then you press Shift Enter so you can have more space. Right, and you do something like, here's a movie controller. So and then press space, and then your movie table view cell, create a similar structure or similar structures with on the Android platform using a recycler view instead of a table view. Retrofit and Moshi. And I'll be nice, I'll say, please write this code in Kotlin. All right, and if you did that, give your ChatGPT a second while it starts generating, and what it should give you is everything you need to write your stuff. Take a look. Here's your data class, right, for Kotlin. Here is your movie adapter, right, that you're going to run. Right, and what it does in the movie adapter, it creates. Now, this is an interesting way of doing it. You could probably go away for not using the movie adapter, but it does do that. That's fine. And then it also gives you a layout. There's your layout, right? Which is kind of interesting, where it gives you like the title text, the studio text, and the rating text right there. Plus, it gives you your app compat activity, your movie activity. It literally gives you all the code you need. So all I need you to do is take this on your own, right, and doing something like this, and basically make it work in Android. So if it works in iOS, I want you to make it work in Android as well. And I'm doing this because of a couple things. I want you guys here to practice showing your APIs in both iOS and Android. Now here I'm using iOS. Now you just do the Android side. And I think the Android side is actually easier in many ways. I'm not sure if you guys agree, but I find it easier than iOS in many ways. Okay, so that is your job for the first part of what we're doing today. Okay, now, did you make it work?
No, mine comes up with a problem. It just comes up with an error.
Okay, let's fix that error. So let's go back to iOS.
It's not a mass error. It just says launch screen may not set custom class names.
Okay.
So I think it's just a.
So let's take a short break. Right now we're sitting at 9:05 or so. I'm going to help Robert out. We're going to take about 10 minutes, and then when we come back, we'll do the next part, which is the JWT part that I want to set up with your backend. Okay. So again, this is just your API. The way to read your API. That's all we're doing. Next week we're going to do more in terms of the full Monty, in terms of adding in more another interface and everything else to make sure that we can do that, right? But for this week, what we're doing is we're just showing your data here, and I want to make sure that you guys can all do the same thing. Okay, so let's take a short break. I'm going to stop recording this one, and we'll come back. We're sitting at 9:05. We'll come back at 9:15 and continue.